Right. Today, main topic is going to be website accessibility, but there's a couple of things I want to mention before we get into that. If we go to Canvas and under this week, notice one thing is called Can I Use? And after you leave this class and going forward, there might be revisions to HTML, new tags added all the time. Not all the time, but they're added sometimes. And browsers don't always make the changes immediately to their code to be able to use those tags. So what Can I Use does is it shows you what browsers implement new features in HTML. So for example, I can click under Can I Use and go and type in Flexbox. All right. Flexbox is something that we looked at, should have looked at last week in the recording. And if we look at it, it'll tell you that it's widely used among most browsers. So the real green indicates that it is implemented. So in Chrome, from version 21 on, it's been implemented. Internet Explorer only goes up to 11 and it's partially supported. Firefox, it was partially supported till version 27 and afterwards it's been supported. So this is a feature that's been implemented in most all of the browsers, including the mobile browsers. So it's pretty safe to use this. You're not going to run into difficulties which sometimes happen if you use a tag that's not implemented by a browser, or if you use a feature that's not implemented by a browser. It can cause trouble and make your web page look different on a particular browser compared to other browsers. So let's look at the WebP image format. Some of you have already turned in images, and typically they're either JPEG or PNG, but there's a new format called WebP image format. And we look at that. And again, it's also available among most browsers. Not Internet Explorer, which is not surprising because that is sort of an antiquated browser. WebGL is a 3D graphics tool. Now, an Opera Mini, that's not implemented, and you can see that. So if you're using a newer browser, and as things evolve, and even after you leave this class, new additions to CSS and HTML come into play, this is something good that you can test your web page. Let's see how this works. Test a feature. Our partnership with Browser Stack allows you to test your website. I don't want to go through that. But that actually shows you how your web page is going to look in different browsers. This is less a problem than it was in the past. When the web was first created, browsers oftentimes did not render pages exactly the same. So you would, back in those days, you had Netscape and Internet Explorer, and sometimes they would do it different. Even today, it's still a good idea for you to test your web pages across multiple browsers. Download Google Chrome. You can download Microsoft Edge. You can download Safari if you're on a Mac. Well, Macs come with Safari, but you can download Firefox and Opera and other browsers, and to test it out, and also to test it out on a mobile device. So you want to make sure your page looks good regardless of the browser that it's been viewed on. The other thing that I have in this week's stuff is pages and directories. And this is the problem that many of you had on your portfolios. It shows you some examples of how you can work. And these work, this idea works with images, with CSS files, with links to other pages. So as you can see here, if you have image source picture.jpg, picture.jpg is located in the same folder as the current page. If you have images picture.jpg, the picture.jpg is located in the image folder in the current folder. Avoid this one. This one will put you in the web server's root folder, and that isn't really well defined on when you're running web pages the way we are. So I wouldn't worry about that. I would avoid that one. Finally, images source picture JPEG means the picture JPEG is in the file one level up from the current folder. There's an absolute path. You should avoid doing this. This is known as hot linking. Again, I would avoid using this that starts with the slash, but I definitely would use this. If you want to have a folder just for images, you can have all your pages in one folder, and underneath that folder, you can have a page called, or a folder called images with your picture in it. This is if it's a folder up from the current folder and then down to images. This would be if you had your pages in a folder called pages, and even with that folder on the directory hierarchy, there was an images folder. So you need to go up and then down to images and so on. The reason we do this is so that your pages work on different setups. So many of you have hard-coded paths like C:\/ user / mzeller / lab1 / image.jpg. That will only work on a computer that has those folders. So there's a good chance, especially given that I'm running a Mac, that I'm not going to have those folders. So therefore, use the relative paths indicated. All right. Main topic today is web accessibility. And web accessibility, in a nutshell, is the ability for people, or the way that people with different abilities or disabilities access the web. And different disabilities affect how a person accesses the web. And we'll make a little document here that talks about the different disabilities. The first obvious one is vision. All right. The web is such a visual medium that if you can't see, you're really at a handicap compared to other people. Now, does this mean that people that can't see can't access the web? No, because there's assistive technology that can help them. What do I mean by assistive technology? Well, built into computers, built into the operating system, are tools that help you access if you have some of these different disabilities. And one of them is a screen reader. So I didn't want that, quick access. Accessibility settings, that's what I want. Oh, and it just Googled it. Let me go in the settings. under accessibility. One thing you could do is you can make the text size bigger or smaller. Now, some of you might have noticed from the beginning of the semester, the text size on the machine that I'm lecturing from is bigger. I had mentioned that I had eye surgery and continue to have eye problems. And therefore, it's hard for me to read. So I've made the text size larger. And you can do that several different ways. One way is here. You can size the text, be bigger, smaller. You can always show scroll bars. There's a screen magnifier. And we can turn that on. And what we are able to do is we're able to see the screen expanded a lot. So this is more than just expanding the text. This will expand everything on the screen. And I'm going to turn that off. Color blindness filters. If you have a certain kind of color blindness, you can turn this on, and that would be how you would see these pictures if you had grayscale color blindness. If you had blue-yellow color blindness, this is how you would see that image. So you can set these in a way that make the colors easier to differentiate for someone that has color blindness. Color filters or color themes, for people with poor vision, they can access these themes to make it easier. Important thing to keep in mind is that when we talk about people with vision issues, we're not just talking about people that are totally blind. There's a whole bunch of vision issues that can affect the way someone accesses the web. So there is poor vision. There's color blindness. And there's also total blindness. Now, how does someone with total blindness access the web? That is done with a screen reader. And let's see where that is. Narrator. Okay, I'm going to turn this on. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this watching the video, but I'm going to turn on the narrator. There's comparable things in Mac OS, I'm pretty sure, but we can turn on the narrator, and what this will do is this will actually read the screen to you. So if I turn the narrator on, I pull up a web page, doesn't seem to be. Let me see, I'm not sure. Is there a apply button I forgot to click or on. Well, narrator, I'm going to turn it on.
Narrator dialog. Skip for now. Button. Set narrator window heading level 1. Welcome to narrator. This is narrator home, where you can get help, access your settings, and learn about new features. Narrator is a screen reader.
No, if you're hearing it, but if you can imagine, as the words are highlighted, it's actually reading these words.
Stop narrator. Press the Windows logo exiting narrator.
And it may be difficult to imagine how you can access the web, letting it read the screen to you. So, but people do it. People do it every day. I worked as part of a NASA summer fellowship for teachers, and I shared an office with a high school student that was blind, and she used a screen reader to do everything that you would think a high school student would be able to do on the computer: create Word documents, create PowerPoint documents, and so on. People are resourceful. If they have to access it that way, you'll figure out how to make it work. Now, assistive technology is one way that you can assist people with one of these disabilities. So I'll put up here assistive technologies. Like the screen reader, magnifier. That's it. What are other ways that you can assist them? And that is by your design. That includes a bunch of things. One thing it includes is to have text equivalents of images. And you can do that a couple different ways. You can do that with an alt attribute, and you can do that with a description. We look here. Images serve a couple different roles. There's images that are informative, like maybe a graph. There's decorative images, just sort of, things to make the website look pretty. Functional images, using them as a link. Images of text, that's one thing that you should not do. So I've seen a lot in the old days, if you had a button with the word home on it, you would actually create an image that looked like a button with the word home on it. That is very difficult for screen readers, and screen readers will not be able to process that. So instead, you should always use text, and you can use CSS to make it look any way that you want to. Alt text, they mentioned. Uh, One of the parts of your assignment is to find resources like this and create a web page for people about how to use these tags and so on. I want to see the actual HTML code. Here we go. This uses the alt attribute. And if you had an image, you could say portrait of Harriet Tubman, photographed in 1880. You can put descriptions just in the text. So for example, if I had a graph, I could have a paragraph off to the side that described what the graph looked like if the alt attribute wasn't sufficient for it. I could have a long description in a separate page. So I could say, click this to go and view a particular description and so on. Tell people what they need to do to view that particular image. So using alt images, alt attributes rather, is one way you can. Including text equivalent somewhere, either on the same page or a different page would be useful. Then when the screen reader reads it, it'll read the text description to them. Interesting thing is you could actually make that invisible so that a person that can see wouldn't see that text description, but it would be read to someone who is blind and can't see. I believe that would work. Other thing you could do is pick out good contrasting colors. The one thing I see a lot in homework assignments is if you pick blue as a background color, you don't go in and change the color of the links. And that ends up having a blue link on a blue background. That makes it very difficult to see, even if they're different shades of blue. So if you're using blue as a background, change the color of the links to something else. But these color schemes help people identify. The other thing to do is don't use color to show meaning. And let me rephrase that. Don't only use color to show meaning. So if you had a paragraph that's important, you might think, well, I'm going to make that paragraph red. That way people will know that it will stand out and that it's something that's very important. Well, that won't work if the person has certain kinds of color blindness. So what you can do is you could make it red and bold. All right. That way a person that can see colors would see it being red and would see it being bold and would know that it's to be emphasized. A person that cannot see the color red would just see it bold, and that would also be a tip-off that the item is to be emphasized. So don't only use color to indicate meaning, use other means as well. Test your pages on a colorblind filter. This shows how you ever see these things where you're supposed to look at the numbers and then they show what someone with colorblind would see. So you could post you could take a picture of your website and upload it here and show what it would look like if you had red, weak color blindness. Look like that. Green, weak color blindness. Blue, weak. And different types of color blindness. Because color blindness doesn't mean that people see in black and white. There's different kinds of color blindness. And some of them make it just difficult to differentiate between certain colors. Okay. I trust when you investigate web accessibility, you may find some other things that you can do as far as vision goes. Second disability that affects how someone accesses the web is hearing. All right. What can you do with hearing? What is the issue with hearing? Well, if you have videos or audio files, if you can't hear, you lose the ability to access that content. There are things you can do. You can caption your videos. That's one thing that you can do. The second thing that you can do is you can link to a text version of your video or audio file. So either through captioning or by linking to a text version. Now, here's an important point I want to make, is that we tend to think of disabilities in terms of their worst cases. Like when we think about vision, we think about blindness. When we think about hearing, we think about deafness. There's a whole bunch of people who have sort of milder forms of those disabilities. For example, myself. I'm not blind, yet I don't see very well. And therefore, I need items on the screen to be bigger. All right. It's amazing, and I'm not just talking about web pages, how some applications work really well with my screen settings and some applications don't because they didn't take the time to implement accessibility within them. So don't make tiny text. Make the text readable. And I know people can zoom in, but still avoid making the text so small. And use reasonable sized text. Put spaces between things. If you have a hard time seeing, you can have a hard time clicking if the link is very tiny. So put adequate space. Make your links big enough and supply adequate space between the links. Now, people are hearing, again, I'm not deaf, but my hearing is not as good as it used to be. And therefore, there's sometimes I would prefer to read than have listen to an audio file or see a video that has captions on it so that if I don't catch a word or two, I can see it. Some cases, you might be in a noisy place where you can't hear it. Maybe you forgot your headphones. Well, captions would allow you to see the content and read it. So one of the keys to accessibility is multiple presentations. I mean, take the same information and show it two different ways. This is helpful for people with certain cognitive disabilities, like dyslexia. If you have photographs along with images, that can help set the context for the text and help a person who has dyslexia navigate and understand what's going on with it, with the text. Dyslexia is very often misunderstood. A lot of people think dyslexia simply means that, you see words reversed. And that can happen when you have dyslexia, but a lot of other things can happen as well. Let's actually look for a dyslexia simulator. Videos. I think this is the one I used in the past. Click here to try the reading simulation. That's one thing by the way, I would say, don't have links that say click here. Have links that are more descriptive. That will help people that are blind and can't read and to understand what the link's about. Help begin. Okay, here's a passage of text. And this might be the way that someone that's dyslexic would read it. All right. I'm going to try to read it. I don't know if I've seen this one before or not, but it's going to be difficult. We begin our trip at a familiar place. A body like yours and mine. It contains 100 trillion cells that work can't make out that word by design. And within each one of these many cells, each one has DNA. The DNA code is actually the, can't make that out, well, again, as you can see, it's very difficult to understand this. And this is just a sample of how someone with dyslexia might read a page. Here's the actual correct answer for the correct version of the text. So one thing that you could do is you could use clear fonts. Don't make the fonts too small. Make the fonts larger. Put adequate space around the words and between the lines. And you can actually do research to find fonts good for dyslexia. Fonts that can help with dyslexia are typically sans serif, monospaced, that means each letter is the same size, non-italic, 12 to 14 points in size. And they give some examples of those. And there's other research on the matter. Now, another characteristic of all these things is that they involve keeping your design fairly simple. The more cluttered that your page is, the more difficult it will be for someone that's dyslexia, as well as difficult for someone that has ADHD in accessing your page. But you know what? Even if I'm not dyslexic and even if I don't have ADHD, I want simple, straightforward pages where it's easy to find what I want and what I want to see is there and it isn't cluttered among a dozen other things. I want big links to click on. That's good for people that have vision problems. That's good for people that have motor control problems, such as moving the mouse with their hand. But you know what? I don't want to have to worry about that. And mobile phone users don't want to have to worry about trying to click on a tiny little link space on their web page. A lot of accessibility is just plain good design. But there are specific things that you can do. And in your assignment, I hope that you will, along with giving information about accessibility, give some practical things that you can do. Now, in the upcoming weeks, we're going to study forms and we're going to study tables. And there are some specific accessibility things that we can do to help someone that is accessing a form and a table to access the material correctly. So all these accessibility things I expect you to have. I expect your images to have all attributes. All right, unless they're purely decorative. I expect you to make it so that the colors are readable. I expect you to use a reasonable font size so it's not too small. All right, are there any questions about any of this? This is a good outline, I think, of accessibility and the issues. One thing to keep in mind is that older people suffer at least mild forms of all these disabilities. Like, I don't have I don't have Parkinson's where it's difficult for me to move a mouse, but I do have arthritis in my hands that makes it difficult to move the mouse around. All right, and I'm not blind, but I do have bad vision, and I'm not deaf, but I have a hard time hearing things. So, and it's like that for people beyond the people that have the most severe disabilities. So these accessibility guidelines really are meant to help a wide range of people. So do consider them and do spend time when you research them, finding as much information as you can, and then live by it. The web pages that you make, follow these web principles for accessibility. All right, if there's no questions, that's all I had for today. If you have questions, feel free to email me. Feel free to stop by during any of my lab/office hours. It is almost November. What, we're a week and a half away from November? So it's time to start thinking about your project if you haven't already. All right, we will talk to you later. Take care.